You know, we're going to start the show this week with a topic that's been very much in the news. I think we all can agree these days. That's international trade. A nuanced and penetrating consideration of the issue can be found in the article, Why U.S. Trade with Mexico and China Couldn't Be More Different by Adams Nager, which ran in Monday's issue of Quality Digest. Now, Nager, he's an economic policy analyst at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, the ITIF. This is a nonprofit organization that offers, as its website says, independent, creative, and nonpartisan analysis to shape the public debate and drive an innovation policy agenda. And the matter in which this particular topic resides, in which it does reside, I think nonpartisan analysis is exactly what's needed. The political rhetoric, as we know, around trade, especially as it concerns the two nations that Nager covers in his pieces, is very heated. China and Mexico have been lumped together as enemies of U.S. commerce. They've been accused of aggressive economic policies that collectively seek to destroy American prosperity and rob the nation of its jobs. Yet, as Nager points out, China and Mexico are miles apart, both physically and ethically, at least according to the ethics of fair trade practices. To support this assertion, he offers three compelling arguments. I want to step through them with you, because these are really good arguments I think he makes in this article, and they deserve to be looked at and considered a little bit in unison. First, Mexico's manufacturing sector is deeply integrated with its counterpart north of the border. In particular, many Mexican firms are key suppliers for U.S. manufacturing, specifically, as we all know, in the automotive industry. Therefore, if U.S. companies choose to open new plants in Mexico or move existing ones there, in many cases the output of these Mexican facilities ultimately will create value, some value at least, for U.S. manufacturers. On the other hand, when production operations move to or are launched in China, U.S. firms tend to reap far less benefits. It's an important distinction there. I mean, there's benefits that still redound to the U.S. industry manufacturing in Mexico, not so much in China. That's a big differentiator right there. Secondly, Mexican companies generally play by internationally accepted rules of fair trade. China, really not so much. Nager's company, ITIF, produces a ranking of nations based on the quality of their policies and institutions related to maintaining free trade and global innovation. In that ranking, Mexico ranks a bit lower in the middle of the pack. So they're not great, but they're not atrocious either. China, well, they rank second from the bottom in that listing. The ITIF considers Mexico an innovation follower, meaning that they don't contribute much to the global innovation, but they don't hamper it either. China, however, is considered an innovation mercantilist, which means that the country overall acts to severely harm and inhibit innovation across the globe. A mercantile approach to that, where they pretty much are going to do what's best for them to the exclusion of everybody else. Okay. Very different kind of framework from what those countries do in terms of world trade. Finally, according to the data that Nager pulled from the International Trade Administration, trade with Mexico does not contribute appreciably to the overall U.S. trade deficit, a little bit, but not much. Meanwhile, Chinese exports to the United States are approximately 5 times the value of U.S. exports into China. That ratio now has fallen a bit. It was as high as 7-to-1. So it's fallen a bit over the past few years, but it's still an incredibly one-way trade relationship. You know, none of this should be taken as a blanket statement. I think that the United States trade relationships with China is awful, and the one with Mexico is great. Again, there's a lot of nuance here, and without question, the Trump administration is right, I think, to take a good hard look at trade with Mexico and China and the rest of the world. Nager's point, though, bears repeating against the backdrop of this notion that both China and Mexico are potential enemies of the U.S. in maybe in a coming trade war. They might be, they might not be, or one might be and the other might not be. I mean, it could go any way, but we need to remember that China and Mexico represent very, very different situations, and it requires really different approaches and different thoughts on how to deal with those two cultures in terms of how they handle trade. Interesting, our long artitle.
And actually, there's a lot of information.
A lot of information in there.
A lot of interesting charts and stuff to look at in there if you want to kind of take a deeper dive.
I didn't run a lot of that stuff, but there's a lot there to look at and consider. But I think it's fair. I mean, each country, in terms of its trade relationship with the U.S., is its own beast. And I think there has been some lumping together of China and Mexico as these people. And if you're not really paying that close attention, you could think both these countries are doing their utmost to harm the U.S. Not really so much. It's certainly not in the case of Mexico.
Right, yeah.
So it's an important consideration to think about.